Hey everyone, very good morning to you all again. Charles here, Frgnt Daily Chart Analysis. The time is now 20 past 10 local time here in Milan, Monday the 27th of July, 2026. And I have executed a position. I've closed 75% of that position. And I'm going to do a little bit of a breakdown. I'll keep it as quick as I possibly can. Just in terms of why I looked to take that position. So it was a Gbpcad short position this morning, just before London had opened. I was eyeing up a particular area in the market. Now, first and foremost, I was actually in the market for higher probable long positions on Gbpcad, and I quickly reanalyzed, and I thought, well, if I'm looking at Gbpcad to move towards the highs, which of course would make sense based on the weekly time frame, you can see the only weekly order block in and around that area. And of course, we've got that refined weekly order block onto the daily time frame. We have a beautiful daily order block right at the equilibrium of that weekly order block, supported to the highs with that daily 50 MA as well, despite the most recent daily candle. 2 days ago, that would have been on Thursday, we closed below it, causing a bit of confusion in terms of looking for immediate longs, because the range then back into that daily 50 MA would have been incredibly minute. However, Friday's daily candle did something a little bit better by way of closing above that daily 50 MA. It is slight, but we take the facts on board. Therefore, daily candle closed above the daily 50 MA, expecting rejection back into the imbalance of that candle before rejecting to move towards the upside. So certainly towards the highs, I can definitely understand why I would love to see Gbpcad move towards the highs. With that said, refining all that down, we're onto the 4-hour time frame, just to look at 4-hour price action and structure in this most basic format to see exactly what's going on. So of course we can see price moving up towards the highs, and on the way down we're trending beautifully in terms of lower lows and lower highs. Now, the position that I took short in terms of Gbpcad, that was a 15-minute time frame only. As a result of course, you can understand my higher time frame bias pretty much putting an end to wanting to take a short position based on my higher time frame directional confluences. However, with that said, I was still in the market to eye up a potential Gbpcad short. Now, if I have a flip-flop back to US dollar CAD and try to understand, well, what would I be looking to do on US dollar CAD? I too was looking at a US dollar CAD potential long from the lows. Now, there is a conflict straight away. It is impossible for me to take a long position on GCAD and also a long position on GCAD. Well, I say impossible, it's most certainly doable. However, would that make sense being the question? Absolutely not, as a negative correlation. And if US dollar is looking to move towards the highs, and of course US dollar CAD is going to look to move towards the highs, and then conversely GCAD is going to look to short. So what I did is head over to the DXY and understood, well, what would I be looking to do on the DXY, higher time frame wise? I wouldn't say a conflict, but there's certainly good reason to expect price to want to move off from this particular area down at the lows when we start to refine the range down. So I do believe the DXY is or does have the potential to revert right back into that weekly range. You can see to the top right hand corner, those most recent weekly candles haven't really done too much at all. With that said, the caveat being yet last week's candle close, of course, closed above an area where price was failing to do so. But with that said, we're still respecting that daily order block towards the downside. So I definitely have a trading range on the DXY. So, where was the confluence for a GCAD long, I hear you ask? So have a look at the 4-hour 50 MA and understand if I am wrong. So I always have two trails of thought. If I'm wrong, where could I go wrong? So my thought process initially is, okay, we're in a range. Would I want to take a position in the middle of a range? Absolutely not. However, if I am incorrect about the range and that price action is now actually just respecting its most recent price action in terms of we've now made a high on the 4-hour time frame, looking for a higher low for a higher high continuation, meaning that my range thought process is incorrect, null and void. Where would I be looking for a turnaround in price to move towards the upside? So I've got 2 points of interest. I of course have this 4-hour order block right down at the lows, which is a refined, which is then supported in my initial thought process by price action and structure in its most basic format, higher highs and higher lows. However, again, if I am wrong, where could price look to react from? I'm looking at the 4-hour 50 MA and I'm understanding, can I rely upon that 4-hour 50 MA? So let me bring this to your attention just here. So we have Price break above the 4-hour 50 MA, retest, reject to the highs. Price makes a high, comes into the 4-hour 50 MA, retests, moves off to the highs. Price makes a higher high, comes back down into the 4-hour 50 MA, rejection, rejection, rejection. So the 4-hour 50 MA is clearly doing the business. Of course, it would make even more sense for price to seek the liquidity below that 4-hour 50 MA by way of my strategy, by way of order block selection, but it's not always meant to be. Therefore, I'm in the market to understand what's going on in the here and now. So if I'm looking to expect a rejection of the DXY, that's going to mean DXY strength. That's going to mean US dollar CAD moving to the highs. In concurrent to that, that also means GCAD has the potential to move to the downside. So if I now have a look at GCAD to understand, well, why would you now be looking for a potential short position on GCAD? So it's not just about the confluence, it's also about, well, what's GCAD telling me? As I've mentioned, GCAD was a 15-minute time frame only. I do have bias on the higher time frames that I have missed out. Perhaps I'll talk about them in a moment. But being honest, I used a 15-minute time frame only. Just have a look at the 15-minute at price action. Again, I say it a lot, but in its most basic format. Just have a look at the lower lows and the lower highs. So let's have a look here. So we made a low in the market, price came up, hit a potential lower high. That wasn't confirmed as a result of that not being a lower low. So we moved sideways for a considerable amount of time. And we made a low in the market. That's certainly a low. So we're coming back up into this area that created the low. There's no order block available. After that low, which has most certainly... Oops, dog's going bananas. Just a moment. After this low, we then came back up for what we could anticipate for a lower high, which then was confirmed as a result of a low in the market being created. So of course, price does its thing. Off it goes, respecting those higher time frame directional points of interest, and we come back up to the area that caused the most recent low. So I've got a couple of ways that I can look to take this position. I've got a thought process. Could I look to take an Asia range? Absolutely. I can take a Frgnt type of Asia range model short, which is by way of lower time frame break or structure. Or alternatively, I could look for an engulfing 15-minute candle. In fact, I won't go into depth with that. That's my entry model. If you wish to find out, then you know where to go. But my entry model, it most certainly showed up. So if you pair everything together, DXY rejection, US dollar CAD moves to the highs, the inverse would be GCAD moves to the lows. Do I have a reason to believe GCAD could move to the lows based on the 15-minute time frame only? Absolutely. We can see where prices made that most recent low in the market. We're now back into that area. Rejection of that area, bearish engulfing candle. I mean, you can pretty much see my entry criteria there anyway. Now, with that said, this morning I was in the market to potentially look for a GCAD long. And there was like a large 15-minute order block there, too large, so I verified that down or refined that down to a 5-minute order block. I then also have the confluence of the Asia range fill, hence why I've taken off 75% of my position at the lows of Asia. So I understand, despite being in, I'd say, a good to a great looking position, I'm not being blinded by the fact that there are still areas in the market where I can absolutely expect a reaction from. And in fact, although this 5-minute order block has been refined down to a 5, if I paint the scenario for you, there's the 15-minute order block, and look at what's happening, rejection towards the upside. You can absolutely understand why I have managed that position to break even, and in addition remove 75% of that position. I am expecting at some point price to revert to following the overall intraday perspective trend of what's happening now, and you can see it. Higher highs, higher highs, then potential higher low for that higher high continuation. So I hope that makes sense. A nice short type of breakdown in terms of using the DXY as a confluence, using the 4-hour 50 MA as a confluence, those 4-hour points of interest, understanding that it is okay to have a thought process that differ, or thought processes that differ. As I've mentioned, DXY could well be in a higher time frame range. DXY is now rejecting from those intraday perspective points of areas to the highs. So they are my two separate thought processes. Does one of those processes align with a particular trade that I was looking to take today? Yes, it does. Therefore, if you have your entry model and you're confident in your setup, you execute the position. So as I say, I hope the breakdowns do help you somewhat. 10 minutes of your life, I do feel like probably could deserve a watch if you feel to do so. And then you'll hear from me shortly. That could, in fact, complete my day, to be honest. Any other further trades that I'm looking to take today will be at very low risk, but minimal risk, because that is the first trade of the day, first trade of the week, and it's off to a winning start. So I don't really want to give any profits back. But as I said, I've got a lot of favourites in the market there today. I'm not going to sit out of a game that is obviously trending in our direction. So all the very best, everyone. Do take care, trade smart, and I will speak to you again soon. Charles.